Well, tomorrow we kick off October, which means two things. One, spooky season is finally here. And two, it's time to talk about Fantastic Fest, baby. What is up, guys? Welcome to my recap and ranking of Fantastic Fest 2025. If you guys are just finding me for the first time, or if you've never seen any of my previous recap and rankings of this festival, Fantastic Fest is actually a genre movie festival that is held in Austin, Texas for 8 days at the Alamo Drafthouse at South Lamar. It's a genre film festival, so horror, thriller, sci-fi, action, sometimes a little bit of prestige drama thrown in for good measure. It's a festival that I first went to in 2022, which was my first film festival ever, and I have covered it and attended every year since, and it is one of my favorite things about the entire year. I have a blast every single year. I see a ton of great movies, and one of the more exciting parts is being able to tell all of you guys about these films, which ones to keep your eye out for, some of which are coming out within a couple of weeks, some of which it might be about a year before we see them get wide release and distribution. So it's always kind of a really cool experience to give you guys these little secrets on what to keep your eyes out for. And this year at Fantastic Fest, I actually watched more movies than I have ever managed to watch at a film festival before, which is ending at a list of 27 films. I've been saying 26 on social media over the last couple of days, and when I was looking over this list to make sure everything was straight, I was like, son of a bitch, I forgot one. I watched 27. Holy shit. But before I run down all 27 of those films and tell you my personal opinion on them, going from worst all the way to my absolute favorite of the festival, I usually like to open up these festival rankings with a bit of a experience, with a bit of an idea of what my overall time at the festival was. And this year being my fourth year at Fantastic Fest, I think it's pretty safe to say this was the best experience that I've had at Fantastic Fest yet. Now, I've never had a bad time, but there have certainly been some frustrations here and there, whether it be the ticketing system, whether it be, you know, the slate of films, which is always kind of a dice roll. And this year, between the ticketing system, the film slate, as well as them having their 20th anniversary, it's their 20th year doing Fantastic Fest, they really pulled out all the stops to make all of the other events going on, the parties and panels and things like that, like really stand out. So this year overall, I think was my best time, despite the fact that it started off kind of rough. I got to be honest. Like, if you watch all of my out of theater reactions from the first couple of days, you could see me throughout the first 3 days just getting more and more disheveled. And it's because after the opening film, you know, with the exception of like Shelby Oaks, which I actually had already seen before the festival, I basically was just getting miss after miss after miss. Like, every time slot for 3 days, I was picking the film that just was not for me whatsoever. And so I was just getting depleted like crazy, like worrying, oh my God, is this going to be like by far the worst year at Fantastic Fest? And then from day 4 onward, it picked up significantly, and it was just off to the races all the way to the finish line. So, of course, one of the best things about going to these festivals is seeing all of my friends that tend to attend every single one of these festivals that I do, and not just Fantastic Fest. Some of them attend South by Southwest, some of them attend Overlook Film Festival. So there's a collection of YouTubers and TikTokers and influencers and critics that kind of just become like your festival friends group. And even got the chance to meet a couple of people that I've known for quite a while online, but never actually met in person this year, which is really cool. Like Mike from We Watched a Movie showed up for 2 days. So we got to hang out and BS and hang out with 3C a little bit. He's got a picture of all three of us somewhere, so I'm sure once he's done doing unspeakable things with it, he'll post it for everybody to see. But it was cool to finally meet him. And, you know, Kanan Becker from Ghost Pirate, got to see him for a second time. This was his first festival. And even a bunch of other people who weren't actually creators, but just like fans of my channel, or, you know, viewers of mine that have heard me talk about this festival so many times. They were like, I got to check this shit out. And so all week long, I was running into people saying, hey, man, I'm here for you. I'm here because you said this was great. I'm having a blast, which is awesome. Like, all week long, having those types of conversations is just fucking awesome. So there's way too many of you to name, but thank you to everybody that walked up to me, introduced yourself, like took pictures, whatever. You guys are awesome. I'm so happy that you decided to take a chance and go out there and experience it. Everybody seemed to have a great time, and I'm sure I'm going to see all of you again going forward in 2026 onward. So that was very, very cool. Now, some other very, very cool things that happened just for me personally. One of them, which was like, the child in me just lit up, was I got to meet Don Coscarelli. Now, some of you guys might have saw the short that I put out kind of detailing this, but they had a Masters of Horror panel on like day 6 or something like that. And I just happened to be wearing a Phantasm shirt. I just wore it that day because that was the next shirt in the pile, just kind of like how I'm wearing one today. And Phantasm 1 and 2 especially are two of my favorite horror films of all time. Phantasm 2, one of the most important movies ever to me, because it was one of like 4 or 5 films that I watched as a very young kid that just turned me into a horror nut. And so I was walking around with this shirt, and my friend Sydney from Horror Chronicles on TikTok was like, hey, Don's inside on stage, right? And I was like, what? And so I ran inside, and sure enough, you got Mick Garris, Don Coscarelli, Ernest Dickerson, and Joe Dante on stage in the highball, just talking about horror and their careers and, the state of filmmaking and the Masters of Horror show for like an hour. And so I slowly kind of crept up to the stage, and right after they got done, they took a big group picture, and then Don immediately clocked me because of my shirt. And he was like, hey, that guy's got the look. And so I got to sit and chat with him for about 5 minutes or so. I wasn't trying to be too greedy because there was a ton of other people trying to talk with him, but super nice guy. I never ask people for pictures unless I'm at a con and I'm paying for it, but I had to get one with him. So I got a really cool picture with Don, and, told him how big of a fan I am and how important Phantasm is to me, and discussed like the future of the franchise, like a prospective remake and things like that a little bit, which was really cool. And then the next day, actually, he was just outside chilling, waiting for Secret Screening 4 to start. And so I got to talk with him for like another 15 minutes and talked about 31 on 31 and zombie movies and all kinds of stuff even further. So that was absolutely amazing as a massive Phantasm fan to be able to do that. And he's such a nice guy. So if you ever get a chance to meet him, if you're a Phantasm fan or, Bubba Hotep or whatever, he is a really cool guy to talk to. And then also a very cool thing for me personally was I actually finally got to meet 2 of the guys from Double Toasted finally. So there's a number of channels out there that I've probably mentioned a few times in the past that were big inspirations for me to start my own channel. And you got like John Campia, Chris Stuckman, a number of others. But one of the bigger ones, maybe even the biggest one as far as my style, is Double Toasted, who used to be known as Spill.com, which I watched all the way from like 2009. And so Corey and Martin, who are basically the 2, big wigs over at Double Toasted, they're the 2 main hosts. I got to meet Corey for the first time the day before the festival started at the Him press screening in Austin. And he was a super cool guy. I'd already kind of talked with him briefly online a little bit and didn't have any idea that he knew who I was until I sent in a super chat to Double Toasted one day, and then made it very clear he knew who I was. So I was like, oh, that's fucking cool. And so he was super nice. And then Martin, I actually, on day 3, they were doing the Strangers Chapter 2 premiere, and so they had a bunch of different people, myself included, dress up as the Strangers. And so we're just roaming around this little bar for like the pre-show party, and Martin was at the bar, and so I decided to mess with him a little bit. So I kind of went up beside him and just like lurked next to him. It's a giant dude with a Dawn of the Dead shirt and a fucking mask, and he just kind of like creeps over to the left, and I was like, are you going to hold it against me if I'm a Double Toasted fan? And he started laughing. And so I just gave him a fist bump, and I was like, hopefully I'll meet you without the mask. And so when we were at the closing party, I saw him over talking with a few people, and then he was eventually by himself. So I walked up and introduced myself, and I was like, hey, man, it's good to finally meet you without the Stranger's mask on. And he's like, oh, shit, that was you. And so we had actually talked a little bit on Facebook, so he even recognized me without the mask, which was really cool. But they were both super awesome, had great conversations with both of them, and that meant a lot to me personally, just to be able to chat with them, because they really are one of my biggest inspirations, and one of the biggest things that I definitely think bled into my chosen style of how I do YouTube. So super cool guys. And speaking of the closing party, one of the most awesome things about this year's Fantastic Fest was the closing party was actually at Troublemaker Studios, which is Robert Rodriguez's own personal movie studio, which was still dressed up in the sets of Alita Battle Angel. So we quite literally partied for like 3 hours on the set of Alita Battle Angel, like in the streets, and there was like medieval shit going on. It was fucking wild. Like, and we came this close to not coming to the party. I've only been 1 year before this, which was last year, and it was cool to be able to say goodbye to everybody. It wasn't anything crazy. And then this year, they made it a little bit more difficult transportation-wise. They weren't doing shuttles back and forth. So me and Sean were like, is it worth going? I don't know. I want to say goodbye to everybody, but maybe not. And then Chuck, my co-host on Lost in the Shadows, calls up and he's like, dude, get the fuck over here. Like, we're partying on Alita Battle Angel sets. And we're like, we're on the way. And so that was an awesome way to close out the night. Me and Sean also took a little break about halfway through the festival and just did like one movie at night and went off with our buddy Rudy and went to the original Texas Chainsaw House, which has been moved to a different part of Texas and refurbished to be a restaurant that is currently called Hooper's. So we had lunch there, got the chance to go upstairs and kind of film some stuff inside of the house, which was a lot of fun. That was a really cool afternoon to kind of get a little bit of a breather, getting away from the festival. And of course, love Rudy to death. I hope we can get a chance at some point to have more time than just like an afternoon in between Fantastic Fest. That always seems to be like the limit of our in-person hanging out. But that was a great day. So yeah, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to get into the rankings. I know that's what a lot of you guys are here for, but it was a very, very fun year, a very cool year. Nothing but huge kudos and thanks to Lisa and all the rest of the team that puts on Fantastic Fest, to all the people at Fawn's PR who handle all of us knucklehead press people and arranging red carpets and interviews and things like that. Did a few interviews as well. I'll put some clips like that throughout this video where it applies. But yeah, it was a very fun time. If you are interested in Fantastic Fest, I can't recommend it enough. So tickets usually go on sale sometime February, March, around there. So just keep an eye on their website. I'm sure there's like an email thing you can join. And hopefully I'll see you out there on 2026, because it's always a badass time. And now we get to all 27 films that I saw at the festival. And something that I always like to note when I do these is that for the most part, there's not really any movies on these lists that I think are just bad, terrible films. Now, we do have a couple exceptions this year, but typically the ones towards the bottom or even at the very bottom are simply just movies that aren't for me. Usually when you go to these film festivals, they're all very well made, but they're very different styles. Some of them are foreign films, and so they're not quite on my wavelength. Some of them, ones are definitely more drama, Oscar prestige, while others are like more gore fest slashers. And it just depends on your taste. So even some of these movies at the bottom, if they sound like they're your thing, please seek them out and check them out, because I guarantee you there is somebody that went to this festival that thinks that my worst film was the best film at the festival and my best film was their worst film. Like, it's a really interesting kind of subjectivity that's going on with these lists. Now, with all that being said, number 27, my least favorite film that I saw at Fantastic Fest 2025, is also my least favorite film that I've ever seen at any film festival. This year does have an exception of 3 movies that I genuinely just don't think are good movies at all. And number 27 is a film called Crushed. Now, this was the second film that I saw at the festival. So it was opening night and it was the closing film of night 1. And this is, I believe, a UK film, but it is shot in Thailand. And there are just so many things that are beyond bizarre about this movie. Essentially what it is that you have this video going around of this woman who is using like high heels or something to crush a cat. And so it's like this little viral video nasty thing that all these kids are sharing around. And this stupid teenager eventually shows this little girl, and she gets so disturbed by it that suddenly she is deathly afraid of the, vitality of her cat, who goes missing the same exact day. And so because the cat is missing and she thinks that this evil woman is going to crush her, she goes out and eventually gets taken in by this guy who plans on human trafficking her. This is all like the first 20 minutes of the movie. This is all the setup. And what transpires in this movie is essentially them taking some of the most like horrifically taboo things, which is animal cruelty, animal death, child trafficking, pedophilia, all of that stuff, and just making you experience it, which is very bold. And a number of those things, if you know anything about me, very, very difficult to sell me on that. And so that in and of itself was probably enough to put this towards the bottom of the list, but you could still make a really good, effective film with those things if you're very careful and you know what you're doing and you actually have something meaningful and profound to say. Can't say that about Crushed. Essentially, the journey you go on in this film is like they're putting you in these really nasty situations where you feel uncomfortable, you feel gross, you feel miserable, which I guess you can attest to the movie being effective, but it never adds to anything that makes all of that misery and that gross feeling that you're enduring for this entire film feel merited. It's essentially a movie that by the end of it is trying to make some kind of a grand statement about people's response to violence and their want for vengeance and how they'll justify violence to, get vengeance. And they kind of, I guess, hold the mirror up to you as the audience where certain characters you really want to see get their comeuppance. You really want to see them get massacred essentially on screen for the things that they have done. And the film kind of deprives you of that and doesn't really overtly say it, but leaves you with this empty feeling, which I can only justify or try to make sense of by thinking the filmmaker wants you to feel that way. He wants to deprive you of that sense of vengeance and almost make you feel wrong for wanting that, which I don't feel wrong for wanting that. I'm sorry. Beyond that, just the story direction, whatever the movie was trying to do, absolutely did not work for me. It bothered me. It pissed me off. But just the actual filmmaking itself was bizarre. Like I said, this is a UK film that is shot in Thailand, and I did my research just to make sure I didn't misspeak. Thailand does predominantly speak Thai as well as a number of other languages, and yet English is the language that every fucking character in this movie is speaking. So it's a UK film shot in Thailand that is played like an American film, which is just stylistically bizarre. The editing is so weird in this movie where there's entire like sections of time just missing, and I don't know what the stylistic purpose of that was. There's even certain things where they're choosing to withhold images from you to give you suggestion that something really disgusting is happening just to reveal that it's something else. And it's like, why are you even making me think that that's happening, you sick fuck? So yeah, 27 crushed. Look, I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody that liked this movie. Everybody that I talked to hated it. Everybody that I talked to was like, oh my God, that was the most miserable thing I've ever tried to watch at fucking midnight. And so I think it was a pretty good consensus that this was an absolute bust. So there was no release date information for it. Again, if it sounds like it's up your alley, I have concerns for you, but nonetheless, give it a shot. This one, not for me in the most extreme way that I can express it. Coming in at number 26 is a film that I absolutely expected to be this low on the list, unfortunately, and that is The Strangers Chapter 2. Now, the real sick twisted knife with this one is that I did have a little bit of hope that after the disaster that was Strangers Chapter 1, that maybe that was some kind of a necessary speed bump for us to finally get to Part 2 and Part 3, where all the cool ideas that they presumably have to make this trilogy are going to start to show their head. That was my hope. And as I alluded to earlier, I walked around with this mask and actually did some scare actor work to promote this film while they were doing the pre-show and the premiere and everything. This was the movie that got the most push as far as marketing. No other movie got 50, 60 different people to wear costumes to really immerse people in the experience. And it was hot. It was miserable. I kind of got the impression, which maybe wasn't meant to be, that I was going to be able to interview the director, Rennie Harlan, who I'm a huge fan of, despite these films, in costume. That didn't happen. So to be completely fair, I walked into this movie pretty pissed off because of just how miserable the experience of walking around in costume was. But I don't think that really was unfair to this movie because I still would have really disliked it no matter what. But I was definitely in a heated mood watching this. But Strangers Chapter 2, if you thought Strangers Chapter 1 was a waste of time because it's essentially just like a low-rent version of the first film where nothing is even close to as good as that original, and I'm not even a big fan of the original, Strangers Chapter 2 is a waste of time because nothing fucking happens. It is a 90-minute chase sequence that, if you really boiled it down, could be like a 10-minute chase sequence in any other slasher film. You know, you have Madeline Petch, I believe is her name. I might be misspeaking, the lead actress. I think that she's solid. I think she's got talent, but it's being wasted in these movies. There could have been an interesting thing about paranoia in this film where every single person she meets, she has this suspicion with, but every person she meets is weird as fuck. We're just regular ass conversations where they're like, what do you want for dinner, darling? Do you need a menu? Look on the back for desserts. Every fucking person in town acts that way. And so it's like you're either a psycho, the killer, or just the worst red herring of all time. There is an absolutely random monstrous CGI boar fight scene in the middle of this film that is like, what in the revenant fuck am I watching? Like, everybody that was in my vicinity, you could just see their heads turn to the left and to the right. Like, they're going to ask every person around them, like, is this fucking happening right now? Or are we being punked? And the only little bit of advancement of the story or the lore that you get here is like these really goofy, clearly reshoot sequences with these kids that are starting to develop somewhat of an answer of the origin of one of the strangers and who Tamara is. And it's like, I don't fucking care. Like, it was not worth sitting through the first film and the second film to kind of half-ass get an answer for that. And beyond that, if you're trying just to answer those questions, you've completely lost the plot on what the stranger's appeal is. They're the strangers. You're not supposed to know who the fuck they are, why they kill, or who Tamara is. That's the whole point. So yeah, I don't know. For one of the bigger like studio releases and the one that definitely got the biggest marketing push for the festival, I think it was easily like one of the worst films that I saw at any Fantastic Fest. So yeah, get excited for Strangers Chapter 3, because apparently then we'll start to get some cool shit. Maybe, possibly. Number 25 was one of the most soul-crushing disappointments of the festival, and it was a film called Night Patrol. Now, this is going to be releasing on January 16th if you do want to check it out, but this is essentially a vampire cop film starring Justin Long. And that was all I needed to hear. Like, I love vampires. I love Justin Long. He's actually got 2 movies on this list. And everything about the concept of this movie sounded like this is going to be absolutely badass. And it starts off pretty strong. Like, the first 5 minutes, the opening, little cold opening is pretty solid. But it is the only movie of the festival, I think, where every successive minute the movie went on, I liked it less. For many different reasons. First of all, they make a classic screenwriting mistake, which is you have your pitch of your movie, you have your hook, your selling point, which is corrupt LAPD officers are actually vampires. And they withhold that shit until damn near the third act. And it's like, that's why we're here, motherfucker. Put that in the first act. That's your movie. So the whole movie, you're sitting there waiting for the shit to pop off. Aside from that, you have 3 different characters in this movie that the movie can never decide who is the main character. You've got Justin Long, you've got his partner, and you got his partner's brother, who is like a gangbanger. He's a Crip, I believe. And so the movie's constantly shifting perspectives in a way that just is delirious. And you're just like, I only care about Justin Long. He's the only one who's investigating these fucking vampire cops. Go back to him. And also, the guy that made this film clearly had about 45 different ideas to put into this film, and he shot all 45 of them because there is just so many different directions this movie goes. There are so many times where it pauses to give you lore and explain something that doesn't need explaining. There's so many different exposition scenes. There's so many cliche type scenes that have to do with like corrupt cops or gang movies that just go on way too fucking long. And everything, whether it's the horror, whether it's the tension, whether it's the comedy, none of it really works here. And eventually this thing boils down to turn into like a gang war movie where all the LAPD cops are like white supremacists, essentially. They're the vampires, the corrupt cop, the bad guys. And the heroes of the movie are kind of presented to be the Bloods and the Crips. And when you have that dynamic, which they really don't earn or really make you invest in a way that makes any sense, and then you have a film that like the tagline of it is defang the police, it starts to become incredibly heavy-handed with whatever the hell it's trying to say. And it doesn't say any of it very well. Like, I'm down for something like that if you can have fun with it and you can do something subversive and have something interesting to say. But this just felt like it was trying to be provocative and never really went anywhere meaningful. And eventually it literally turns into like a fucking Green Lantern movie. It was bizarre. It was absolutely bizarre. You know, I was sitting next to my buddy Chuck, and he's very vocal when he does not like a movie. So like with it, we were both so excited for this. And after about 35 minutes, all you heard was him going, Again, another movie that the overwhelming majority of people that I talked to had the same experience of me, were massively disappointed, but there were 2 different people that actually really liked it. So maybe there's going to be some of you out there this works for. Comes out January 16th. Give it a shot. I didn't like it at all. Now we've reached the point in the list where these are movies that I didn't necessarily like a whole lot, but it's more so because they were either just mediocre or really weren't on my wavelength. I don't have near the biting resentment that I have towards the bottom three as I do for these next set of films. Coming in at number 24 is a film called The Curse. This is an Asian horror film that is very much of the same cloth from things like The Grudge, even The Ring to a certain extent, that has a fantastic opening scene, and nothing else in the film ever measures up to that opening scene. Essentially, what you have is like a typical Japanese horror haunting type film where there's this entity that is haunting people and killing them one by one, but there's like a social media angle to it. Like the motive of the person who's cursing them is because of jealousy and resentment through social media posts. And there's a cool idea in there, but the movie has this very offbeat tone to it. Even the way that you get the gore effects here, they're very cheaply done, but not in a very convincing way. Like they tried to go practical. I think there was some CG in here, but they try to go practical, but the practical effects are done so poorly that you just kind of laugh. Like there's literally a spot where they're trying to do the Exorcist head spin thing, but there's a guy with clearly what is a false body sitting in front of him that's like way more in the foreground of the shot, and he's like sitting on a spinning plate or something like that. So that's the type of effects where you're like, I can tell you're not working with a lot of money, but maybe you should have done CGI on that one. Overall, it's a movie that was fine. Like it wasn't bad to get through. It just really set the bar high with that opening scene, which had a great kill and a really creepy tone to it. So if you really like Japanese horror films like The Grudge, The Ring, give this a shot. You might actually really enjoy this one. For me, it was just fine. It was okay. Number 23 is going to be Coyotes, and this was actually the first film that I watched. I had a screener for it, so me and Uncle Sean watched it the day before the festival kicked off, and this is unfortunately the second film on the list starring Justin Long. You know, I used to say for a long time, Justin Long was like the signal flare in a horror film, that this is about to be some wacky, wild, badass shit. I mean, Jeepers Creepers, Drag Me to Hell, Barbarian. Anytime the dude showed up, it's like, oh, this is going to be a fucking awesome movie. And he's had a little bit of a dry streak here lately, whether It's a Wonderful Knife or these two films. And Coyotes is a movie that I believe was probably made around the COVID era. It takes place when there's like these LA fires going on. And essentially you have Justin Long, Kate Bosworth, who are a real life couple, and they're stuck in their house because of these LA fires up in the mountains. And while they're stuck in their house, there's these like pack of coyotes that start to descend on the house. And so it's kind of an animal attack movie where they're the home invasion styled, where they have to get out of the house eventually, but they can't leave. And it just felt like everything they were going for in this film just didn't really come together for me. I didn't find it to be scary. I didn't find it to be thrilling. I didn't even find the comedy to be all that well done. It was just a very harmless, okay watch. And I think probably the most frustrating thing about it is that the coyotes in this movie are so horribly CGI'd that there was a number of people at the festival that actually were swearing up and down that they were created with AI generation, which only the director can tell you with truth whether or not that is the case or not, but I can tell you that they're bad enough where I can almost believe that. I mean, it's the same animation every single time these coyotes show up, where they're just like, and so the main threat in the film, the main source of the horror, is like the unbelievable uncanny valley of the movie. So I just thought this one was average at absolute best. There are some people that enjoyed it. There are some people that had a good time with it that I talked with, but I didn't think there was much special about this one, unfortunately. Justin Long, come back to us, baby. What are you doing? Number 22 was the closing film of the festival, and that is a movie called Whistle. Now, this is a Shudder release, but it is going to be released theatrically on February 6th. And this is a film that essentially, if you have seen Truth or Dare, Tarot, The Bye-Bye Man, you've seen this movie. This is the latest of, let's get a bunch of teenage caricatures together, have them accidentally curse themselves, and one by one this curse comes for them and kills them. And they're desperately trying to figure out a way to break the curse. Like, you've seen this movie a dozen times before in the last 10 years. Now, there is one really great kill in the movie that elevates it a bit, where it's very CGI, but it's very gnarly and it's very creative and cool. And there's another kill that I thought was pretty decent that kept this from being probably in the bottom 3 or bottom 4. Everything else about it, though, was about as generic gets. Somebody trying to make a high school horror film that just never really captures the vibe of high school or high schoolers. You even have Daphne Keane in here, who I really like, and I didn't think that her performance was all that great. Maybe it's the writing or the direction. Her character is just like angsty gothic chick who used to do drugs, and so she's got like one face on the entire film. You've got Sophie Nélisse, who is from Yellow Jackets. I thought she was pretty good in here, but everybody else is just playing caricatures. You've got the comic book nerd who's got a crush on the cheerleader. You've got the cheerleader who's only dating the jock because he's the jock, and then you got the jock who, of course, is an asshole. So it's just got nothing in it aside from that one kill scene, maybe two kill scenes that make it stand out, to the point where we're watching it. And when that kill scene happened, I turned to Sean and I said, kind of audibly, I was like, finally, something cool happens. And like everybody in my row laughed. And I was like, oh shit. So it's not just me. If you like those, teenagers curse themselves movies, if you have fun with them, then you'll probably have fun with this one. But for me, it's really the same old thing. It's like Mad Lib scripts. We just change out the device in which they curse themselves, and we change up whether it's PG-13 or rated R, and there's the movie again. Number 21, we got Don't Leave the Kids Alone. This is a Spanish film that, unfortunately, I think I was just primed with a very incorrect elevator pitch for the movie. Whenever we're selecting films, you have on the Fantastic Fest app like a paragraph kind of talking about either the production of the movie or the director or the film itself. And essentially the phrase that was used to pitch this movie to all of us is supernatural Home Alone. And I would not use that phrase to describe this film. There are two kids that are left home alone, and they are the characters we're following, but that is the only comparison it has. There's no booby traps, there's no supernatural entities chasing around the kids and they're fighting back or anything fun like that elevator pitch primed me to think this movie was. So is it well done? Is it like competently made? Yes. And I actually know a couple of people that this was one of their favorites of the festival. So I do recommend you check it out if you're curious. But for me, it had two absolutely grating elements to it that prevented me from really enjoying it a whole lot. Now, essentially, the plot of the film is that you have this mother who has just recently moved to this house with her two young kids. It's like a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. And she goes off to this party that she has to go to for her work and leaves the two kids alone. And they are the two shittiest, most fucking aggravating, non-listening, moronic fucking kids you have ever seen in your life. They're two little brothers who hate each other. And so the entire movie, they're just yelling at each other, bitching at each other, arguing, fighting, breaking shit, telling each other to fuck off. And it's just like, God, is that what my kids do when I leave? Because I hope to God not. And when we're not following these two shitty kids, they go over to the mom who's at this party where she calls the house like 5 or 6 times throughout the movie. And each successive call, it is more and more clear there is something very wrong happening at home, and the bitch never leaves. And so as a parent, I was annoyed by the kids. And as a parent, I was pissed off at the mom. That was hard for me to get over. Now, there is a slight supernatural element that's slowly kind of boiling into the back half of the film, but when it finally kind of shows its head, I just didn't really think it was all that effective. The movie leaves off at a point that I didn't find was all that satisfying. So it was interesting enough. Maybe if the kids weren't quite so great and I could have had a little bit more fun with it, just watching these kids have these hijinks or whatever, but it just grated on my nerves too much for me to fully enjoy, so I have it this far down the list. Coming in at number 20 is likely to be one of the big hot takes of this video, and that is Sirāt. Now, this is a film that got huge acclaim out of the Cannes Film Festival, and it also got huge acclaim coming out of Fantastic Fest. This was a movie that they actually, the PR company reached out to me personally and was like, hey, do you want a ticket to this? And I didn't really know what the movie was, but I assumed if you're reaching out to me, oh, there must be some crazy horror shit or something going on here. You got to know what my taste is. And so I walked into this movie totally blind. And what I was told is that you're not ready for Sirāt. This is a crazy genre bender. It's so wild. And so I'm thinking like horror, sci-fi, action, like what is this going to be? And what the movie's actually about, it's a Spanish film, but it takes place in Morocco. is about a group of ravers. You know, they have all these stereo systems that are set up out in the middle of the Moroccan desert, and they're just sitting there just fucking vibing out, just boonch, 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 boom, boom, boonch, boonch, boonch. And this father and son are walking around this rave with a picture trying to find the father's daughter and his son's sister, trying to find his missing daughter. They haven't seen her in a while. And then the government comes in and shoos everybody away from this desert. I think the backdrop of the movie is it's during like World War III. That doesn't really play into the movie a whole lot, but you know that's worth noting, I guess. And so when the ravers pack up and drive away, this dad and this son decide to follow them. And so the entire film is just about this dad and this son following this group of ravers throughout the Moroccan desert. And eventually, in the back half of the film, some very tragic things start to happen. And I can totally see the type of crowd that would absolutely just like go nuts for this movie. Clearly, I'm in the minority with it, but I found this movie to be unbelievably boring. I did not understand at all what they were going for. I didn't really feel all that affected by when things started to get a little bit tragic by the end of it. Like, you definitely feel some tension, but I was just like, okay, like I never felt like the movie was actually building towards something narratively. It's just things start to happen and then the movie ends. And so this is one where I can just honestly say, yeah, you guys in the comments that are going to tell me I just didn't get it, you're right. I didn't fucking get it. And I wasn't alone. I had my friend Gigi from Room for Screams sitting next to me, and she felt the same way, where we were both just sitting there like, oh my God, this thing is taking forever. Like the last 15 minutes of this movie literally felt like an hour. And we were so ready to get out of the theater because we were just so unbelievably bored that she left her sunglasses and I left this hat sitting in the chair. We just fucking bolted out of there like, please, fuck, somebody pull the fire alarm. Luckily, she went back and got that, found my hat. So, you know, this isn't a replacement or anything like that. But yeah, it was a movie that had all this hype behind it. And a lot of people that saw it that we're friends with were like, oh my God, 5 out of 5. I just don't understand it. Like, this is just something that, if there's any movie on this list that's just so not my thing that I just don't understand at all what is going on and what everybody's gushing over, it's Sirāt. Coming in at number 19 is an interesting one, and it's called 13 Days Till Summer. Now, this is essentially a Polish slasher film where you have this bullied kid and his older sister and his sister's high school friends that are hanging out without any adults in this rich ass house with like this high security system, and this slasher killer descends upon the house, sets off the security system that locks everybody inside, and starts to kill these teenagers one by one. Now, for the most part, the movie I thought was just a very straightforward, like decent slasher. I didn't think the kills really had enough oomph to them to really stand out. One thing that was a little stylistic about it was there was a number of kills where they would just hard cut to like the middle of the kill, like something's going on in this room, and then all of a sudden it hard cuts to somebody like getting choked out with a plastic bag or something. So there was a little bit of flair in the editing. It was shot very well and lit very well, everything like that, like technically very well made. But I was just waiting for the movie to have something about it that really stood out, because it was just like, okay, this is a very straightforward slasher film with teenagers, and not one where even the carnage candy's standing out that much. And then suddenly, out of fucking nowhere, in like the last 7 minutes, they do something to make it stand out. Unfortunately for me, they go so bleak and nihilistic and mean-spirited with what happens out of nowhere with not really any setup in the final act of the film, that it kind of killed the movie for me, where I was just like, okay, that's just really unpleasant, and I just feel like I kind of wasted my time. Like, I don't really know what you were going for there, but I didn't enjoy it. And so it was one that I walked out going like, okay, that was whatever. The most interesting thing about the movie, though, was after the director started to talk in the Q&A, which I actually left for because I was like, I'm going to go do something else. But Uncle Sean and a few other people stayed around, and so they filled me in. And apparently, this is the only movie on this list that you guys are never going to be able to see. This is a film that some Polish company, I don't know if it was a streaming service or a studio or something, funded this movie. Had a lot of interference during the production, and so the director was very forthright about the fact that this was not really the movie that he was trying to make. I'm curious what movie he was trying to make. And essentially, he let it out that, yeah, this movie is never going to be released. This is the only crowd that's going to be able to watch it because this Polish company that actually owns the rights to this movie refuses to release it. The director and the producers have actually went out and sought out people from other countries to fund the distribution for it. And the company that owns the rights has said no every single time. So for whatever reason, and I don't really think it has to do with the quality of the film. Like, I didn't really like it all that much, but it's not like a badly made film. Just for whatever reason, they don't want this to see the light of day. So the director's just taking it around to a few film festivals. I think there's like one more he's going to show it at, and nobody else is ever going to be able to see this film. So that's kind of interesting. I've never watched a film at a film festival, aside from a couple of years where it felt like The Toxic Avenger was going to be that movie, that it's just never going to see the light of day. Nobody in the public that I talk to is ever going to be able to experience what I experienced. So kind of a weird story there. But yeah, a movie that I thought was okay throughout it, and then just went in a direction that either is going to totally win you over if you just love bleak nihilistic shit, or is just going to completely sour you on the movie. Number 18 is Disforia. This is a Spanish film that is very much along the lines of the final act of 13 Days Till Summer, where it's very bleak, it is very nihilistic, but I feel like they knew where not to go. And so I was able to enjoy this one a little bit more. Like, they would give you enough of a hint, like, we're going to do something really fucked up, and you would believe it and you'd start to tense up, but they always knew how far to go to not lose the audience. And essentially what the story for this movie is it takes place in like this dystopian future where there's been like this economic collapse. Suicide rates are through the roof, where just the population is just wiping itself out. And you have this family of three, a husband, a wife, and a young daughter, where they're kind of just holed up in this house trying to survive. And then the mom and the daughter wake up the next day and the dad's just gone. And the same day, this woman that they don't know descends on this house and essentially starts live streaming through her phone, trying to terrorize them and, torture them, and eventually try to kill them, but, chasing them around, trying to do a lot of depraved things to them for a live streaming audience. And there's some twists and turns along the way that were pretty interesting. I have to be honest, this was the second to last film that I watched at the actual festival, and I was absolutely wiped at this point. So I was struggling to stay awake a little bit in the first half. I was shifting in my seat a lot. So I actually had to ask Uncle Sean, who was struggling himself, like, explain that to me because I missed something. And so maybe I'm slightly unfair to this film. I at least want to be forthright in that. Maybe it'd be a couple spots higher if I saw it earlier on in the festival, but it was interesting enough for something that had that very bleak tone to it. They at least had kind of an interesting setup. I think that the acting was really good. And as I said, if you can convince me that you're about to go places I really don't want you to go, and I can tense up anticipating that, but you have enough sense to not completely go there and just get the reaction out of me anyway, I appreciate that. So Dysphoria, it was solid. Number 17 was actually our second secret screening. It was revealed to be Yorgos Lanthimos' new film, Bugonia, which is going to be coming to theaters limited October 24th and wide on October 31st. And this is the latest project, I think 3 in 3 years, that he has done with Emma Stone and Jesse Plemons. And essentially, you got Jesse Plemons here, who is this super paranoid conspiracy theorist, where he's got his cousin and him working together, and they think that aliens are going to take over the world. And they're convinced that Emma Stone, who is this big CEO of like this pharmaceutical company, that she is one of the aliens. So they kidnap her, they shave her head, they lock her up in the basement, and essentially they're interrogating her, trying to get her to admit that she is an alien. Now, I need to say right up front, I am not a Yorgos guy. I have not enjoyed any movie that this guy has made. Like, I can appreciate the artistry on display. Clearly, he's a very talented filmmaker. Like, it's all shot really well. He's got crazy visuals. There's an artistic flair for sure, but he does not make movies for me. Poor Things was a movie that I saw, and I was like, okay, I don't get what everybody's losing their mind about, but sure. Kinds of Kindness, wasn't a fan. And then this one, I was just like, okay. When they announced that that was the secret screening too, I was like, oh, wish it was anything else, but sure, let's see what you got. Now, I will say this is probably his most accessible film that I have seen so far. I know, of course, there's a few I haven't, but this is one that I think more people will get into that aren't necessarily into the super bizarre, weird stuff that he's into. And I think performance-wise, everybody does a great job here. As I said, clearly artistry on display. It's shot very well. It's directed very well. But this is a film that I honestly just didn't really get all that enthralled with the ride that I was on. I felt like it was pretty obvious where it was eventually going to head, and so I wasn't really all that shocked or wild about certain things that happened that were clearly going for shock. And by the end of it, whatever message they were trying to say, I just didn't really get much profound out of it. Obviously, I can't really relay what the message that I got out of it, or I'll spoil the movie. But, me and even a couple other people, like, Uncle Sean, I think is the same way, or just not really a Yorgos guy, where we're talking and we're just like, is that what you got? Yeah, that's what I got too. Like, that's not like, what's the big deal? Everybody else seemed to love this movie. My buddy Chuck, this is a 5 out of 5 for him. Might be his best film of the year. Elaine from Deep Red Perfect Blue went nuts about this one. A couple other people thought it was amazing. And so another movie that I'm probably going to be a bit on the minority for, which tends to be the case with Yorgos movies. But yeah, I don't know. I just don't really get it. This is one that I can see the talent on display, but whatever the point is, I just don't really get a whole lot of pizzazz out of that. I'm like, okay, fine. What's next? Now we've reached the portion of the list where we're getting into movies that I had a solid time with. I recommend these. They weren't like amazing, but they were ones that I enjoyed. And so first up at number 16, we got VHS Halloween. So this is basically a Fantastic Fest tradition at this point. They always have this movie play at a midnight screening, usually later in the festival, but this was actually played on day 2. And so VHS Halloween, I think it was fine. I'm not really a big found footage guy. I'm not even really a big VHS guy. Of all the ones that I have seen, which are like 6 of them at this point, the only one that I really thought was great was last year's, which was VHS Beyond. I thought that one was a really good one. This year, I thought was fine. For a Halloween themed one, I didn't think they really embraced the Halloween aesthetic or the Halloween holiday nearly enough. You have 2, which ironically are the 2 shorts that are my favorite, that really embrace the holiday. One of them in the middle where people are essentially being turned into candy, that I thought was awesome. And then one where a guy is essentially like, he's the guy that everybody's annoyed with in the neighborhood because he always puts on these big extravagant haunted houses for Halloween, and he plays this haunted record and it ends up turning his haunted house into real shit. I thought that one was really cool. There's some other ones that are well done. They just don't feel like Halloween, and so they were kind of a little jarring for me. But if you're a VHS fan, I think this one is solid. Most of the people that love VHS all walked out really enjoying this one. I'm just not a big VHS or found footage guy. So for me to say that this was at least good, if you love them, you'll probably think it was great. And this is going to be coming to theaters October 3rd. So check it out. Like I said, there's a couple of really good shorts here. I just wish maybe they embraced the Halloween holiday a bit more. And also, I did not like the wraparound story that they keep going back to at all. It's like this, alien soda or whatever. Again, I was like, what the fuck does that have to do with Halloween? Number 15, we have Bad Haircut. Now, this is one of 2 films that I actually watched at home with a digital screener after getting back to Georgia. And Bad Haircut is a horror comedy where you have this super eccentric, weird guy who is this barber who essentially they got this bullied kid and his group of friends take him to this barber and they're like, hey, cut his hair, make him a fucking stud. And they leave him there. And the guy is really off-putting, but like overly friendly. And then it turns out there's like motherfuckers locked in the basement and shit just goes bananas from there. Now, I have to say, the comedy side of the movie, I didn't think was all that great. I thought it was very silly. Even some of the acting felt like almost like too parody comedy style, and so it just didn't quite work for me. But I appreciated how bizarre the movie was. I appreciated how weird and wild the directions that it went was. This, to me, felt like a tried and true Fantastic Fest film. Whether I love them or hate them, these are the types of films that I really enjoy watching at this festival because they're just fucking nuts. And it's something that I probably would never click on, would never watch outside of the festival, but experiencing them and just these weird, wacky ideas from independent filmmakers, sometimes there's just a really cool quality to that. So this one, I had fun with it. I just wish the comedy was a little stronger. Number 14, we have Deathstalker, and this is the new film by the director who did Psycho Goreman and Freaky Friendo, which I did not see that one, did see Psycho Goreman. And one of the producers of this film, Max, was actually a fan of mine that I met outside, and he actually hooked me up with a ticket to this, so appreciate it, Max. And this is essentially like, think Psycho Goreman mixed with like Xena the Warrior Princess or Hercules or something like that. And that's essentially what you have. It's like a fantasy sword and sandals type movie that has got like an Evil Dead type spin to it. And I had fun with this one. You know, I don't know if I would ever rewatch it, but I'll tell you what was cool about this movie felt like something that I watched in the 90s. And if I had this exact movie when I was a kid, I guarantee you I would have watched that bitch on loop and tore that VHS tape right off of the spools. So there was a lot about this that was a ton of fun. I loved the gore in it. I loved the monster and the puppet designs and everything. Like I said, very Evil Dead 2 vibe. And so that was really cool. You have Patton Oswalt in here as almost like a Yoda type character that was really fun. There's a pretty juvenile type sense of humor. Again, Psycho Goreman, you've seen that, you know what you're getting here. But it was a movie that honestly, if it had just been like 15 minutes shorter, I probably would have bumped this up 3 or 4 more spots. It does go on a little bit too long. It's like 110 minutes or something like that. A movie like this, I feel like should never even approach 90 minutes or longer. But I had fun with this one. This is kind of a loose remake to a film from the 80s, I believe. I've never seen that one, so if you're a fan of that, you might even love this even more. But if you dig those types of movies, that Hercules, Xena Warrior Princess type thing, and you'll enjoy almost like a 90s puppetry type of throwback look to it, I had a really good time with this one. Coming in at number 13 is a movie called Dolly, and this is like a 70s exploitation slasher throwback type film. And the way that I've described this to people is it's like taking the monster, the mother from Barbarian, and putting like a Leatherface skin on top of it. You have this slasher killer called Dolly, which is like a Leatherface style character that is dressed up in a doll suit and a doll mask that kidnaps this woman who is our protagonist and treats it in captivity as if it's her baby. And so it's a movie that definitely has a lot of nastiness going on, not just in the gore, but like bodily fluids and some other stuff. There is some pretty gnarly gore and things that happen. So I think this is a movie that for those that like this type of film, whenever it does finally release, the horror community is probably going to go nuts for it for a week or two. You know, we love our new potential horror icons. The jury's going to be out on whether Dolly actually meets that criteria or not. They already got ideas that they're going to be doing a Dolly 2 and a Dolly 3 if they get the funding for it. So could be a brand new slasher trilogy. What I liked about the film is that it's definitely bold. It's not afraid to go gross, and I liked kind of the grimy aesthetic to it, very Texas Chainsaw Massacre style. And I think that there's a couple of really solid performances in it, especially from Ethan Suplee, who is incredible in this. Like, he's unrecognizable. And so as somebody who's been a massive fan of him ever since the Boy Meets World days, it was awesome to see him do something like this. And even Sean William Scott shows up in this movie for a bit, and I always like seeing him. You know, he's Stifler. I really wish that he was going to be there. Meeting Stifler could have been the icing on top of everything that I talked about at the beginning of this video, but yeah, he wasn't there, and neither was Ethan Suplee. But nonetheless, it was a movie that I thought was overall solid and has potential to do even better with a second or a third film. Now, that also comes with a little bit of frustration, because it did feel like they're withholding a lot of their best ideas for the sequels. And sometimes I think that's a little bit foolish. Like, there's a thing that I was talking about with Night Patrol, which is like a screenwriting mistake of don't hold your best idea for the third act if you can find a way to make it in the first act. And this is like taking that even further of like, you're holding your best ideas for the next movie. So I don't know why they wouldn't have put their best foot forward and put a lot more of their better ideas in the first film. Aside from that, a stylistic choice that they made is to break this movie up into chapter markers, which I thought was just pretentious. Honestly, I didn't think that added anything. I thought it was a weird choice, especially when some chapters are literally like 6 minutes long and others are like 25. There's even a point in the movie where I feel like the titles of the chapters kind of spoil where things are going to be going, which I didn't appreciate. The very tail end of the movie, I felt like kind of petered out. It didn't feel like they had a real strong way to close things out. And there is a lot of really stupid character decisions in this movie, which you guys know is a big pet peeve of mine. Now, I feel like there was enough going on that I could kind of forgive it and be entertained by everything else more. But I talked to a number of people who didn't like the movie as much as I did. That were just like, I could not stand the amount of stupid character decisions. Like, they lost me. Totally understand that. So this is a movie that I think has promise. I just hope that they don't continue to withhold their best ideas because you're never guaranteed the sequel. Number 12, we have Appofeniacs, and this was a movie that a number of people said was one of, if not their favorite of the festival, so definitely keep your eyes out for this one. And essentially, this is a film that is doing like a horror thriller type thing with a deep fake and AI. You have these three separate groups of people, these three different stories, almost like an anthology, but not, where there's this guy who's using this new deep fake AI technology to put people's faces into videos that aren't actually them, and absolute chaos ensues. So for example, with like one of them, he takes a woman's picture and puts it into like a porn and sends it to the husband. So he thinks that his wife is like fucking his friend when she's not. And there, there's another one where a woman goes on like this racist rant in a stairwell and it's absolutely not her. And what I thought was interesting about this movie is that I actually have genuine concerns for deepfake and AI for those exact reasons. When you have those of us that are online and are very public with our face and our voice and everything, like there is more than enough footage of me online for somebody to make whatever the fuck they want at this point. And if that happens, when that happens to any of us, like how do you combat that? Are we going to get to a point where deep fake and AI videos are just going to run rampant and we're constantly going to be trying to like disprove things? Like that's insane to me. And I've actually had those thoughts numerous times, and this movie kind of visualizes all of that in the most like over the top extreme way, but it was very effective for that. I mean, if there's a video of me going off on some crazy rant somewhere, how many people are going to believe that? How many people am I going to convince if I say that's not fucking me? And how am I going to be able to prove that, So this is a movie that takes that concept, has a lot of wild fun with it. It gets more and more carnage filled and more crazy as the movie goes on. There's a little bit of a non-linear type storytelling to it. A lot of people compared it to Tarantino. I wouldn't go quite that far, but I understand why they were kind of leaning on that one. The thing that kind of weakened this for me was that because it felt like an anthology where you have these three very separated stories and the only through line, the only like wraparound story is the guy who's making these videos, which doesn't ultimately end up in any satisfying conclusion. It really felt like the movie was ultimately building to not a whole lot. It was just like three examples of what can happen, but there was no like overarching story or overarching climax the movie was building to. So it just kind of ends. And that left me feeling a little bit unsatisfied by the end of it. So it's very entertaining. I think that that's a very clever concept that, as I said, I've already been primed to be very nervous about. So it's one to definitely check out. For me, I just wish they had a little bit more of a satisfying climax in mind that made the movie feel like it had more of an overall point. Number 11 is Luger, and this is actually the 27th film that I watched. I watched it here in my studio just a couple of nights ago, and this is a Spanish like crime thriller type film. And a number of people said this was one of, if not their favorite of the festival as well. Martin Thomas from Double Toasted is one of them. So I was really looking forward to checking this one out. Was glad I was able to get a screener for it because I was not able to get into any of the actual showings at the festival. And essentially what you have here is, stylistically to me, it was kind of like a Guy Ritchie film without like all the fun and all the comedy. Like take a darkly serious version of Guy Ritchie. And you have these two guys who are like these low rent criminals who are hired by this lawyer to get this stolen car back that's supposed to have all this money in the trunk. And when they get the car back, there's no money, but there's this safe inside of it that has this Luger from like World War II. And that gun and their possession of the gun sets off a series of events that just gets weirder and crazier. And they get embroiled in all these different little gangs and things like that. Trying to trace down the origins of this Luger and people trying to find it. And this is another one that honestly I wish I was able to watch earlier on in the festival, because at this point, like I cut myself off at this film afterwards. There was a few more I could have watched because I was like, I feel like I'm just wiped at this point. Like I'm 27 movies in. I don't want to keep watching movies and being unfair to them. Now it's still made it up to number 11. So I think if I had watched this earlier on in the festival in the actual theater, it probably could have made my top 10, maybe even my top 7 or so. I did like this one. I just didn't feel as invested in the story because I was just kind of like burnt out on watching movies at that point. So just, again, trying to be perfectly honest and transparent about that. I thought the acting was really good. I thought that the story overall was interesting. I appreciate that kind of crime caper type of storytelling. Guy Ritchie's style never really works for me all that well. So I kind of appreciate more the dark, serious version we get here. And I think that ultimately, character-wise, there's some interesting arcs going on that are paid off well by the end of it. So this is one that if you like those style movies, definitely keep your eyes out for it. I didn't see any release date for it. Otherwise, I would let you know. So just keep your ears open for it. Coming in at number 10 is one that's very complicated for me to place. And it was my most anticipated of the festival. And I would say that it's in competition for my most disappointing of the festival, despite the fact that I still liked the film and still gave it a positive review. And that is Black Phone 2. I absolutely adore the first Black Phone. That was either my number one or my number two favorite horror film the year that it came out. I've watched it a bunch of times, and Black Phone 2 was always a hard sell for me because what I love so much about the original Black Phone was it was a small, contained story. And I never really saw an obvious or a clear way on how you could make a sequel out of it. And as much as I loved it and it was successful, I kind of feared, I'm like, don't do the thing where you just make a sequel because it made money. And I never really felt convinced, even though I knew for a couple of years they were going to be making this, that this was going to turn out to be all that great. What ultimately sold me was when I started to see some screenshots and heard people talking about it and rumblings and leaving comments saying, hey, did you see the Black Phone 2 trailer? It looks like they're going like a Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street route. And I went, ooh. Well, I ain't watching the fucking trailer because it's Blumhouse and I'll see the whole movie, but that's awesome. I'm totally bought in on that. And I could so totally see, like, maybe they cracked the code. Maybe I'm actually wrong. That's baked into the cake already, that there's this realm, this supernatural realm where spirits stay. And if the grabber's there, he could still get to, like, fuck yeah, that could be great. And so I was really hoping that this was going to be like an instant, easy number one, number two for me. And what I will say, I have done a full review for this. If you want my full thoughts, I'll put a link up here. But what I'll say to kind of briefly cover my thoughts on Black Phone 2 is that I absolutely loved the Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy Krueger styled sequences, and they're very overt. Normally, I would bitch about that. Normally, I'd be like, yo, you're basically just copying overtly at this point. Like, you're just borrowing it. There's nothing original here. You're taking Freddy Krueger shit and you're putting the grabber in his place. But I'm so Freddy starved that I didn't give a fuck. I was like, hell yeah, give me more. That's fucking awesome. So everything that was like a nightmare sequence where the grabber's doing his thing that is very supernatural and otherworldly and dreamlike, I loved all of that. And even just narratively, totally bought in on how that makes sense with the first film. I really like the Super 8 type of grain and style that most of this movie is shot in. You're taking Scott Derrickson's thing that he did with Sinister and a little bit in Black Phone and really making it like a huge piece of the film where literally anytime they're in the dream state, it's this Super 8 vibe, and the sound design and the score that he has that matches those sequences is totally haunting the same way that it was in Sinister. The movie is fucking brutal. Like, there is some images that you get here that are absolutely grisly, and pretty much all of them have to do with children. It feels like Terrifier 3 has just kicked that door open, and now everybody's like, fuck yeah, we're going there now. I loved how brutal it was and how bleak it was at times. What didn't really work for me at all, though, is all of the narrative ways that they were trying to justify the existence of this sequel, all the ways that they were trying to expand the lore and, give all this backstory about the two main characters' mother that we didn't even meet in the first film, and how she ties in with the grabber, and how there's more significance to why the grabber was after Finney than you ever realized in the first film. And it's like, you're betraying completely the concept of that first film to me. You're betraying how tight and contained and how small scale that film was and how intimate and personal it was. And now you're like trying to expand it to be this bigger thing than it ever was meant to be. And none of it really worked for me. Everything with the grabber, totally cool. Everything else narratively just felt like they were really trying to do way too much, to the point where the film really does take a long time to get going, because the first hour almost is all caked into this lore expansion and going over things of the past and exploring dreams. Like, it's a while before the grabber even shows up, to the point where I was actually afraid, like, are we only going to get the grabber in the third act? Luckily, it's not that long, but it takes a long time. And there's even a point where, like, I can forgive the Nightmare on Elm Street overt references, but there's even other things that Scott Derrickson is very directly and obviously pulling from, like Finney's sister here, who's played by Madeline McGraw, who's amazing in the movie. her character is basically 11 from Stranger Things, like visually, short hair, everything down to a T. And so there's a lot about this where I'm like, it doesn't feel that original. It feels like kind of a greatest hits of a lot of things that Scott Derrickson likes. And that's cool. You can have fun with that. But what I loved about Black Phone was how original it was and how like distinct it was. And it kind of lost that here. So it's a movie that I feel like as much frustration as I have with it, I'm obviously going to rewatch it. I'll be there day one when it releases wide to check it out again. I'll do a spoiler review for sure. And I'm sure that there's enough there that I like that this will be a regular rewatch for me despite my frustrations. So ultimately, despite the fact I have much more negative to say about it, it felt dishonest to not put it at least at number 10 because this is a movie that way more than the ones below it is going to be a mainstay in my life at some point. So I liked the movie. There was people that I was with that absolutely loved it. What seemed to be the rule, with only one person that I talked to being the exception, is that if you love the original film, the second one's kind of a hard sell, and there's not a whole lot about it that you're probably going to really vibe with. If you didn't really think the first one was great or you thought it was wildly overrated, the second one you're going to fucking love. Because everybody that I was with, that was the rule. If you loved the first one, they were like, it was okay. And if you walked into this saying, I hope it's better than the first one, they were like, that was fucking 5 out of 5. That's what I wanted from the first one. So it's going to be a very divisive film. That's going to be a really interesting thing to see all the different discussions and the different sides that form when it comes to theaters on October 17th. So check it out. Let me know what you thought. And I'll be there with a spoiler review whenever it releases. Coming in at number 9, we have Ikatan Darah. Now, this is an Indonesian martial arts film. This was actually what played on night 1 against Crushed. And everybody that saw that was like, that was fucking awesome. And all of us that saw Crushed, well, we were crushed. And so this was one that I definitely wanted to check out on the back half. And for somebody that I'm not really all that much into martial arts, that's something that is very much an Uncle Sean thing. So typically he kind of picks a few of those movies and I tag along, and some have been better than others. This is one of the better ones for sure. Basically, you have a martial arts champion who has to fight off all of like these loan sharks and everything to try to save her younger brother. And it's very much hard R, like there's bloody kills, there's very much a lot of grisly weapons being used, like that big buzzsaw fucking thing that the Friday the 13th, part 7, that Jason was using in the woods is in here. I don't know exactly the details of it. I'm sure Sean's going to get into it more with his video, which should also be launching today, by the way. But somebody involved with the Raid movies is involved with this movie. So similar kind of style fighting in the way that it's shot. Not nearly as good as the Raid, but it was a fun movie. If you like martial arts film, if you just like watching people kick the shit out of each other, it was a really good time. So for the amount of movies that I saw this year that were just like bleak, dark, depressing, heady, a lot of child death, something like this was very fun to check out on. Basically, it was the last day of the festival. It was the first film that I kicked off the last day with. So I enjoyed this one. Ikatan Darah. No release date yet. Keep an eye out for it. And now we've reached the top 8, and these are all of my favorite films of the festival. So kicking off number 8 was actually our first secret screening of the entire festival on day 4. And a lot of us kind of had a good idea what it was going to be, and it ended up being right, and that was Silent Night, Deadly Night. Now, yesterday, I actually dropped a full review for that, so I will put that up here for all of my thoughts. But this is a film that I was looking forward to because it felt like watching this at Fantastic Fest at a midnight screening was going to be the best possible context to check out this movie. And I think that I nailed it because Silent Night, Deadly Night was a lot of fun. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the original film. I don't like the second film at all. Who does? And I have never seen any of the sequels, which I've heard are just as bad, if not worse. But the original is very much like this exploitative kind of slasher film that was just getting a lot of infamy for having a killer Santa. Like there was protests and everything about it. It's a decent slasher. It's got a couple of iconic kills, but never been crazy about it. So for me, I walked in saying, okay, well, if they try to give me any kind of a decent story or some good characters, it's not going to take a lot for this to really improve on the first one for me. And for me, this was light years better than the original film for a couple different reasons. One, They do try to give you a genuine story here. They do try to make Billy an actual character that you're invested in and is layered and has a lot of different complications about him. Rohan Campbell is playing him here, who got a lot of flack for his Corey Cunningham character in Halloween Ends, and he's really good here. You also have Ruby Modine, who's playing opposite of him as kind of a side character that he has this love interest with, and she's great. Their chemistry is great. And all the way up until like the first hour, the film is pretty much what I thought it was going to be. It's like a modernized version of the original film where they tried to modernize the gore a little bit. Didn't go nearly as brutal as I thought that they were going to, and I think that the movie probably could have used a few more brutal kills, to be honest. But I was like, this is a solidly entertaining little Santa slasher. I like this. And then you get to a point where the movie really turns the concept on its head. And me and Chuck looked at each other and we were like, that's fucking awesome. And so this is a movie that does what a remake absolutely should do, where it captures and brings back like the spirit and the vibe of the original, but totally turns things on its head and does things wildly different. What I described this movie as out of the theater is it's like taking the original Silent Night, Deadly Night and putting it in a blender with Venom, Frailty, and Dexter. And I absolutely loved all the new directions that they went. I wish it would have happened a little earlier in the film, because it did feel like I was a little bit more just kind of going along for the motions for the first 45 minutes to an hour, while still having very much a lot of fun. And then once that happened, I was totally way more invested in the back half of the film. But I think it was just so clever. It was such a cool way to modernize and twist things a little bit while very much capturing what people really like about the original, even having some throwback kills and a lot of Easter eggs that people got a big kick out of in my theater. And I think it actually sets it up to where if they want to, and they have the success to, they could have a nice little franchise here, 2 or 3 more movies, and horror fans, slasher fans would really dig it. So this is one that for slasher fans, especially, the one you need to keep your eyes out for. It's coming to theaters on December 12th. It's an absolute blast. Coming at number 7 is Shelby Oaks, which is Chris Stuckman's directorial debut. I also did a full review for this, as well as a vlog of when I went to New York to attend the Kickstarter screening about a week before the festival kicked off. This was actually the 3rd time that I watched this film within a week. There was nothing else going on in that time slot that I wanted to see, so I was like, whatever, let me check out what the Fantastic Fest crowd thinks of this movie. So I was very curious of what would be different between the Kickstarter crowd and the Fantastic Fest crowd. So watched it for a 3rd time and actually got the chance to interview Chris as well as the 2 lead actresses in the movie. It's actually the 3rd time I've seen the film. And the fun fact I thought of last night that you'll really appreciate: this is the first time I've seen a film 3 times in its theatrical run since 2002. You want to guess what film it was?
Holy shit, was it Signs?
It was Signs.
Oh my god! Yes, man. Fuck yes.
And the composer of the film. So I've done a lot with Shelby Oaks, and it's been a very cool experience. And what I will say to kind of reiterate some of my thoughts on the movie is that I think it's a very solid directorial debut from Chris. Now, of course, I'm coming to you from the perspective of somebody who looked up to Chris. He's one of the people that inspired me to start my channel. I am somebody who financially backed this film years ago when he was first just kind of funding it on his YouTube channel. And of course, the experience of going to New York and all that stuff was pretty awesome. So I had a little bit different investment in this movie than the vast majority of other movies that I talk about and review and rank. But I did think it was a really solid directorial debut that has some genuinely good tension, a couple of really good scares. I think that Chris definitely has an eye for certain styles of filmmaking, and he blends them all together in kind of a creative way here. You've got a little bit mockumentary, a little bit of found footage, and then just more your traditional narrative horror film. And the story at the heart of the movie about a woman who is still hunting for her sister who's been missing for like 10, 12 years and the world has given up on her. I thought it was a really interesting and clearly a very personal story that Chris gave a lot more context to whenever I met him, and he's talked about it numerous times in Q&As since. So I had a really good time with this one. It's definitely not a movie that takes like these gigantic swings right out of the gate that I kind of hoped that it would. And the big point that I tried to make in my review that I still hold to now, and it was only validated with the people that saw it at Fantastic Fest, is do not let those big names make your expectations explode for this movie beyond what it was actually created to be, which was a low budget independent film. So if you walk in expecting A low-budget, independent, first-time director effort from Chris Stuckman, the YouTuber. I think you'll be really impressed with it. If you walk in expecting Neon's newest crazy horror film that's going to change the landscape of the horror genre and fucking Mike Flanagan put his name on there, I think you're going to end up expecting things that the movie can never deliver on. And I'm already seeing some of that in the marketing where certain terminology is being used that I really fear might backfire on the film a little bit. So it's a movie that I just thought was a good first effort from Chris, and I'm very much invested in rooting for him going forward in his filmmaking career. So comes in for me at number 7, and it goes wide on October 24th, just in time for spooky season for all you guys to check it out.
What type of instruments did you use, and was any of them that you used like a first time in this score versus your other projects?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. There's an instrument that's kind of all over this film. It's called a guitar viol. So it's like, if you can imagine a fretted cello, essentially, because I'm a guitar player, I can't play cello.
Same.
But nice. So that instrument is kind of really the heart and soul of the film. That's where we get some of the main themes.
Coming in at number 6 was one of the bigger surprises of the festival, and it was actually the opening film titled Primate. And this is the new Johannes Roberts film. This is the guy that did the 47 Meters Down movies. He did Strangers Pray at Night. He did Resident Evil Welcome to Raccoon City. So all the movies that he's done have kind of a very divisive reception. Some people love them, some people hate them. And I think this is easily the best film that he has done yet. And it's essentially like if you take Cujo and replace the Saint Bernard with a psychotic chimpanzee who has rabies. And so you have a movie where there's this very rich, like, kind of environmentalist family that live in Hawaii, and they have this chimpanzee very similar to like Caesar the ape in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, where they've taught him sign language and everything, and he's basically like the little brother in the family. And he ends up getting rabies and starts to go nuts and starts fucking people up. And it is gory as hell. It is a lot of fun. It's got a great sense of humor to it. It's genuinely intense and creepy. The chimp is a actual practical suit, and it looks phenomenal. It's an actor in a suit, and it looks real. The gore is pretty much all practical, which makes all the difference in the world. I had such a fucking great time with this movie. Like, it kicked the festival off with a bang. Unfortunately, I had a string of bad movies after that kind of soured the momentum that it made. But if I had picked some better films, it would have been like, holy shit, that was like the greatest opening night film I've seen yet. Had so much fun with it. The only flaws with the movie that is going to vary for everybody is that you do get some of those stupid character decisions. It approached almost being too much for me and then paused, and I was like, okay, thank God, because you were starting to lose me. And there is a certain quality of like a CW style cast to most of the kids here. Like, it's a bunch of teenage kids, and a lot of them are just really goofy teenage caricatures. But overall, what the movie is going for, it really nails the fun experience there. Like, it's a total shut your brain off and just enjoy the carnage type of animal attack film. And I actually said in my out of theater reaction, which I stand by, this is the most fun that I've had with an animal attack film since Lake Placid. And that's an absolute cult classic to me. So I really enjoyed this one. It's coming to theaters January 9th, and it's going to be one hell of a fun January film. So check it out. Coming in at number 5 was our third secret screening, and it's Paul Thomas Anderson's new film, One Battle After Another. And this was one that I wasn't necessarily like excited to see, but I was like, okay, this will be cool. They showed us the 70mm print, so that was kind of like the exclusivity of us getting to check this out. It's already out in theaters now, so we only got to see it like a couple days early. But this is essentially a movie about a group of, whether you want to call them revolutionaries or left-wing terrorists, that years later, Leonardo DiCaprio is, raising his daughter away from all that stuff in his past, and the past essentially catches up with him, and his daughter is taken away. And so he is on this mission to go and hunt down his daughter and save her. And what I will say about this film is that I liked it so much that I am starting to already gather some Blu-rays to do a deeper dive into Paul Thomas Anderson's filmography, because he's one of those directors that I just haven't really got a lot of experience with yet. I've seen Boogie Nights, I've seen pieces of There Will Be Blood. Beyond that, this is the, I guess, second entire film of his that I have watched. So that's pretty awesome. Whenever you get me interested in a filmmaker that a lot of people are going to hear that and be like, dude, join the fucking party. Where have you been? I get it. But I liked it enough where I'm like, okay, PTA, thrill me. Let's see what you got. What I will say is that this is a film that I think has unfortunate timing with its release. I don't know how successful it's going to be outside of like film critics and film bros and people like that, because it is dealing with a lot of things that unfortunately is eerily similar to events that have been happening here lately. Like literally the day after we saw this screening, not too far from where we were in Texas, there was an ice facility that was shot up by a sniper, and that's something that literally happens in this movie. So I think there might be a little bit of a political disadvantage to what is going on here. And I also have found people to have very weird reads on this movie, depending on where they land politically, which I think is a shame, because it's one of those movies where, you know, it's not like you can't enjoy a film that have your protagonists be not the best people. I mean, like Goodfellas is one of my favorite films of all time. You're following murderous scumbags the entire film, and I love it. So this one, the fact that the movie opens up with like a 30-40 minute prologue showing our characters, our protagonists, like bombing places and shooting people and holding people at gunpoint for political reasons. It's like, okay, I hope you earn this. I hope you get me along with their journey and find a reason to make me root for these characters. For me personally, they do with Leo DiCaprio, because you get this time jump, and he very much, once he has his daughter, is like, I'm leaving that shit behind. I'm a father now. And it's only the past catching up with him that kind of sets the movie in motion. I don't find it to be a movie that is all about the politics and the motivations of what they were doing when they were revolutionaries. And I feel like some people have just latched onto that so much where they're taking this movie as like a fight the man type message. And I'm like, I don't know what movie you watched, because this was a father-daughter story. This was about no matter who you are in the political spectrum and what your past is and what your beliefs are, about how certain things just really make you grounded and are going to be the most important thing to you no matter what is going on. And family is usually one of those. And so the things that I was getting out of this story really don't feel like the things that a lot of people are really praising or latching onto with this. And maybe I just got the wrong read on it. Maybe that's not what Paul Thomas Anderson meant. Maybe he absolutely meant this to be like a, yeah, fight the power, fuck the current administration type movie. But it just feels like a very concerning type of movie to do that when your characters are quite literally terrorists. Like, I just don't know what message you're trying to send if that is the intention. So I don't assume that is the intention. But seeing a lot of people online very much like cheering that on, like, fuck yeah, this inspires me. I'm like, it does? Weird. Beyond that, you know, the internet's always fucking weird. Beyond that, Leo DiCaprio is phenomenal here, as he always is. You know, when you have somebody that just performs at that level all the time, it's like weirdly redundant to say that he's incredible. But he's great. One of his best performances for sure. Wouldn't be surprised if he at least gets a nomination. You have Sean Penn in here, who gives like one of his best characters ever. Like clearly his best performance since like Mystic River, and maybe one of his most iconic like characters ever. Like his villain is fucking wild. Like you can't really describe exactly what he's doing. Like there's a physical performance going on. There's like these quirks and these weirdness to him. There's a comedy all throughout the film, but especially with some things going on with his character that I thought was just an absolute riot. So I loved what he was doing. You've got Benicio del Toro in here in kind of a smaller role, but a very memorable role where so many people are walking out with like him being the standout star. He does like this little dance thing whenever he's getting arrested. That's becoming like a big meme, and it's wonderfully shot. It's a movie that's definitely like a genre blender. It's a little bit action. It's a little bit drama. It's a lot of comedy. There's definitely some thriller stuff in there. It's certainly one of the funniest movies I've seen all year, which is a relief. It's got a nice sense of humor to it, and it's shot beautifully. I might have already said that, but there's a sequence in the third act that's a chase scene that is like one of the most iconic looking chase scenes, the way that it's executed, that I've ever seen, where it's a bunch of hills and the camera's just like following up and down these hills as you're seeing the car like disappear and reappear. And the way that that creates tension and not knowing what the person in front is going to do and the perspective of the person in the back, like it's absolute masterclass filmmaking. So moments like that, I totally see why everybody's on Paul Thomas Anderson's nuts. I'm like, okay, that's some fucking badass shit. What else has he got in his filmography? It is a film that I think is a little bit too long. You know, it's a 3-hour film. It doesn't like really drag, but I think there was opportunities to tighten it up a little bit for sure, especially in the prologue. It does feel a little bit odd, which I think leads, unfortunately, to a lot of the weird reads on the movie, that you have characters that are quite literally political terrorists, and the movie doesn't necessarily glorify their actions, but it certainly doesn't condemn them either. So that leaves things feeling a little bit uncomfortably ambiguous as far as what the movie's intentions are. So that's a thing at least to note. You know, I have some things about it where I'm like, I kind of wish they would have condemned that a little bit more, because that's not good on any side. And that's just kind of this is the nature, I guess, of when you're talking politics nowadays. But yeah, it was a movie that I thought was great. You know, it was a nice little surprise for me. It was a movie that, like I said, has motivated me to check out more of his films, and that's a pretty awesome little gift here. So coming at number 5, Paul Thomas Anderson's new film that is likely to be a big Oscar contender at the end of the year, and it's already out in theaters, so check it out. Let me know what you think. Coming in at number 4 was the movie that finally pulled me out of my funk from the first 3 days, and that is a film called The Plague. As far as dramas go, this was the one that was the absolute standout for me at this year's Fantastic Fest. It's going to be coming to theaters on a limited run on December 24th and then going wide on January 2nd, and I implore you, seek this movie out. Essentially what it is a coming-of-age teenage drama where you have this socially awkward kid who's joining this water polo team that is being coached by Joel Edgerton. And all of the kids bully and torment this one kid on the team. They tell him that he has the plague because he has like a skin rash. And this socially awkward kid does not understand or agree at all with why this kid is being tormented and ostracized, but he also wants to be accepted, like all of us do at that age, by all of his peers. So he kind of joins in with it a little bit, and then eventually has a bit of an attack of conscience and starts to befriend this kid and realizes that he's perfectly fine. There's no reason why he's being bullied. But then he becomes the ostracized one because he associated with the kid with the plague. And so you have a story here that is so relatable, and it never really like evolves past very typical teenage boy drama, but it is shot and executed and scored and lit in a way where it's very much like a horror film, where this kid's anxiety and his growing, worry and sickness about being pushed away from all of his peers and being treated like this fucking monster, it very much colors that emotion with the vibe of a horror film, as if he's actually becoming infected with something. And so I thought stylistically it was so profound with what it was doing. But one of the reasons why the movie hit me so hard is because I had an experience that was almost identical to this when I was in 5th grade. There was a kid named Brandon, I still remember his name to this day, who everybody in 5th grade fucked with for reasons I never understood. I was never a kid that joined in on bullying, and I was never really a kid up to that point who was ever bullied. And so it was just odd to me. I'm like, what did he do that everybody fucking hates this kid and just is so cruel to him? And one day, for reasons I don't exactly remember, but I started talking with this kid Brandon about Pokemon cards of all things. And we ended up hanging out after school that day and like trading Pokemon cards and talking about the Pokemon movie. I was into that shit for like a year. And started to hang out quite a bit after school. And just like in the movie, whenever other people, mostly other guys in 5th grade, caught wind that I was hanging out with Brandon, all throughout 6th grade, I was a fucking pariah. I was suddenly downgraded from like, Cody, the guy that gets along with everybody, to like, oh, I'm bottom of the barrel now along with Brandon. I'm the fucking freak. And so the movie, as it started to show its head and what it was talking about, it really hit me where I was like, I'm watching a fucking movie about me. I was there. This happens. And I'm sure there's a ton of people watching this video right now that's like, yeah, I have an experience just like that too. I thought it was very emotionally well done. I think that the message that it has about bullying, about being yourself and having self-confidence and not being afraid to be who you are around other people and not trying to change who you are to appease people that really don't give a shit about you. I thought all of that was done so well. Even the horror side of things where, they're literally using like a rash to visualize what happens psychologically to kids when they're bullied to that degree, where it's like they tell you so often every single day with absolute certainty that there's something wrong with you. There's a reason why you're not cool enough to hang out with us. If you start to fucking believe it, you start to believe you actually have the plague. So yeah, I thought this was phenomenal. This absolutely turned around my festival like in one movie, and I was like, thank Christ, a movie that I loved. So the plague, like I said, comes out at the tail end or the very beginning of next year, depending on what city you're in. Check it out. I thought it was brilliantly done. And now we've reached the top 3, and coming in at number 3 was actually a pretty pleasant surprise for me, and that is SISU Road to Revenge. Now, I was a fan of SISU, but I wasn't nuts about it. There's a lot of people that I know, like Uncle Sean, who was crazy about it, and I was like, yeah, it was a fun time. It was solid. And so I expected this to be like a fun palate cleanser. Like after watching a bunch of dark, twisted horror thrillers, you would walk into Sisu and just watch him fuck up Soviets or Nazis for 90 minutes and be like, all right, cool, that was a fun time. Now back to the horror. And this movie was fucking awesome. This is exponentially better than the first film, in my opinion. I think the action is better. I think the choreography is better. It's gorier. It's more carnage filled. It's more extravagant with what's going on. The set pieces are more ambitious because the whole thing is like a road movie, hence the title. He's literally trying to drive from point A to point B, and the Soviets are trying to stop him all along the way. So he's got like trucks, he's on trains and, battling planes and shit like that. It's literally a road to revenge.
I was curious. So in the title of the movie, it's Road to Revenge, and literally the whole thing is like a road trip. It's all in motion from start to finish. And I can imagine that causes a lot more difficulty in choreographing and executing action sequences that have to be in motion the entire time. So I was curious what made you want to take that leap. Was it just kind of like a personal challenge, or if there is like a movie in particular that inspired that choice?
No, it was just like a challenge for me, and basically I've always been thinking that what is missing from all my films is speed. Mm-hmm. Like that I wanted to do something with speed and be in a constant movement and stuff like that. So that's the reason basically.
Can you pitch to my audience why they must go see Sisu Road to Revenge, though you should go see it because it's awesome?
Well, the reason to see Road to Revenge is the fact that it's fucking awesome.
I agree.
Tonally, the Sisu movies fit somewhere between like the action choreography of something like John Wick and the tone of The Transporter, like the ridiculousness of it. Like there's moments in this movie where something so over the top and bullshit happens, but you're having so much fun. You're like, fuck it. Physics be damned, that was awesome. And every time you think you've seen the most badass thing that this guy is going to do, there's something else that's like 10 times more badass that's right around the corner. So Sisu Road to Revenge, it comes out November 21st. If you like the first one, I guarantee you're going to like or absolutely love this one. If you were like me and just thought the first one was fine, this one, I think, is such a massive improvement. It's one of my favorite action movies of the year, and I don't know if they had plans for a Sisu 3, but I'll be fucking there day one because this is absolutely my type of thing. Had such a blast with it. Coming in at number 2 was our final secret screening of the festival, and it is Gore Verbinski's new film that is titled Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die. Hey, I nailed the title, finally. Now, this was an interesting one because Secret Screening 4 was the only one that felt like nobody really had a solid idea of what it was going to be. The other 3, we had on pretty good authority from certain contacts of what they were going to end up being, so they weren't so much of a secret. This one, there was people saying the Gore Verbinski film, which I had no idea what it was. There were some people speculating The Running Man, some people thinking Anaconda. All we knew and all I hoped for was like, okay, well, this is at least going to be a fun one, hopefully, because we've had 2 Oscar films back to back. And when they announced that it was Gore Verbinski's film and they revealed what the title was, I was like, what is this going to be? And all I knew about it was time travel. So I'm thinking like a cure for wellness, but time travel. It's probably going to be really, visually driven and probably a very heady movie. And I was like, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Whatever. I wish it was something like Running Man. And within one scene of Sam Rockwell walking into this diner with this fucking raincoat time travel device and just totally taking the stage and riffing for 5 minutes in the only way Sam Rockwell can do, I was like, sold, totally fucking in, let's go, baby. And this ended up being by far the most fun movie of the festival and by far the funniest film that I've seen in 2025. Now, it doesn't release wide until January 30th, 2026, but just like with Primate, that is going to be one hell of a treat for January, people, because, you know, those of us that have birthdays in January, we get fucked every year. So next year, we're eating good, guys. Good luck, have fun, don't die is essentially a sci-fi comedy satire film where Sam Rockwell is traveling back in time from an apocalyptic future where AI has taken over the world and humanity is absolutely decimated. And he walks into this diner and there is a certain configuration of people in this diner. There's like 47 people and there's a certain number and combination of people that are going to be the right resistance group, like his little group of freedom fighters that he can take on this adventure this night to stop the creation of the AI that absolutely wipes out humanity. So you start the movie and he's on like trial 117, like he's died over and over and over again. And so what it ultimately does is they go on this adventure and then you get like these little breaks, these little chapter markers where it tells you the backstory of like 2 days ago of all the individual characters that he chooses for this run. And in the middle of learning about these characters, it colors out a really like over the top satirical version of today's society, but scarily not that far off. Like, and that's the brilliance of the comedy of the movie. It shines a spotlight on the absurd things that we treat as normal that are absolutely not normal whatsoever. Like how glued and zombified people are, especially teenagers, to their fucking phone where they can't do anything without this thing in front of them. Or something as dark, as absolutely gut-wrenching and serious as school shootings leads to the funniest run of jokes and bits of the entire year. And it's all because it shines a spotlight on how something as horrific as school shootings have literally become so common that it barely phases most of us anymore. And so it's doing certain things like that to poke fun at today's society while also kind of giving suggestion of how these different things can lead to the downfall of society over time, especially with technology. And it just goes in so many different bonkers, crazy directions that there's always a little action around every corner. There's a few like moments that definitely lean more in a horror thriller tone, but it always has this very sharp sense of humor to it that I'm telling you, there's like a whole run of jokes there where you're just like, I'm fucking dying. I'm like holding my side. I'm laughing so hard. And it's the type of film where at multiple points, especially in the third act, you start to wonder like, are you approaching making a decision that's going to ruin this movie for me? And every time you feel that, they do something that wins you over. Even to the point where the very end of the film, I was like, I think you just lost me. I really hate the direction that you're going now. And then it continues to go on and it's like, never mind, totally redeemed. This movie's fucking great. I don't know how they're going to market this film. You know, this is something that he could not get a lot of studio backing for. Gore Verbinski, despite being Gore Verbinski, had to do a lot of independent funding for this movie to actually have it see the light of day. So all I can tell you is if you love movies, and especially if you're somebody that says, I want original movies, take your ass to the theater on January 30th and check this thing out because it's an absolute blast. And it deserves to be a success. And I fear that certain hard to market elements about it might lead it to be a film that ultimately is a profit loss. And I just don't want to live in that reality. So good luck, have fun, don't die. Absolutely loved it. And now we have reached my number one film of Fantastic Fest, and that is Curry Barker's directorial debut titled Obsession. Now, Curry Barker, I don't have a lot of experience with, but now that I've seen this film, I'm certainly going to familiarize myself. But he is a YouTuber who apparently did like a lot of comedic style videos, and he really exploded onto the scene, I think last year or the year before, with this like 50-something minute film called Milk and Cereal, which I had not seen and I'm absolutely going to check out here very soon. And this is his full like feature-length debut. And essentially what this movie is you have a guy who is totally smitten for this girl that he works with, who is very clearly friend-zoned him. and he buys like this little gag gift in this little like witch shop or whatever, and it allows him to make one wish. So he makes a wish that this girl loves him more than anything else in the world, and disastrous results ensue. And people, I'm here to tell you, this is a movie that goes in so many directions that you will never see coming. Like, this is a movie that is fucked up, it's hilarious, it's uncomfortable, it's unnerving, it's shocking, it's terrifying at points. Like, the performance of the girl who has got this wish cast on her, Indy Navarrete, her physical performance in this movie is enough to scare the fuck out of you, to where if you are single and watch this film, you're not going to date again till like 2030. There were multiple points in the movie. I'm so glad I got to see it in a packed theater where the whole fucking theater was like, oh, like just grimacing at something that happened on screen, or having something come out of the shadows, just 35 people in earshot all gasping together. Like, it is a movie that goes for it. And as soon as you feel like you've seen the most wild, sick, or twisted thing the movie has in store, oh, they've got more in store for you. So it's a movie, I really don't want to describe anything that happens with any kind of detail, just like with films like Together that I saw earlier this year. It's one that I'm going to recommend. Don't watch any marketing for it. Don't look up a trailer. Don't look up anything more of a synopsis beyond what I just gave you. Don't watch clips. Avoid the fucking poster if you can. Just trust me. If you love original horror films, if you are so desperately seeking something to get emotional reactions out of you like shock and fear, this is one of the few films in recent memory that actually got all of those out of me. So there is no release date currently for just kind of even more of a sell of this. Focus Features apparently saw this movie premiere at TIFF just like a week before Fantastic Fest, and dropped $15 million in front of Curry Barker and said, I don't want you talking to anybody else. We want this fucking movie. And so Focus Features is the distributor for this, and they have not announced a release date yet. I assume it'll be sometime like maybe summer 2026, but whenever it's released, I'm telling you, go out, check this thing out, walk in as blind as possible. It is a wild fucking ride. And Curry Barker is yet again another person who is absolutely paving the way for people like me who have prospects to one day make a movie, of starting as a YouTuber and then just exploding onto the scene with a movie that just makes you go, oh, this guy's going to have one crazy fucking career ahead of him. So nothing but huge hats off to Curry Barker. Obsession was awesome, but as much as I've loved the last couple of movies that I've talked about, Obsession was the one where I was like, oh yeah, that's the reason I go to Fantastic Fest for right there, baby. That's the fucking one. So that's it. That is my ranking of all of the films. That is a little bit of description of my experience at Fantastic Fest this year. Like I said, keep an eye out for tickets. They should be dropping here in about 5 months or so, and I hope to see a lot more of you guys there and see all of you that I met this year there again for the second year. Uncle Sean should be dropping his video as well, so I'll put a link to it up here if he's already got it out, but if not, go to his channel. A lot of you guys are probably already subscribed. Check out what movies he saw. We should have somewhat differing lists, but we did see a lot of the same movies as well, but have very different takes on them, I'm sure. So check that out, and we'll see you next year with Fantastic Fest 2026. That's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews. I'm also going to put the playlist up here of all my previous Fantastic Fest coverage for you to check out. Also, like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.